Hello, I'm Debs and this is Debs Make This and you are very welcome here. And today I have for you the final part of my Fleur-à-Terre's Spring Sewist Make. So if that interests you, please stay tuned. The first thing to say is if you haven't seen the first two parts, probably will make more sense if you go back and have a look at those. I'll link them there, and there's also a playlist that's like Spring Sewist or something. This video, Kayleigh from Fleur-à-Terre's let me choose a fabric which she's now stuck in her shop, which is this beautiful blue daisy fabric, which is a Fableism fabric, and that is as last she'd restocked and it was available to buy, and I'll link it down below. She also has lots of other very beautiful fabrics. So this is the pattern Scout Byrdie. The details of the pattern will be linked down below and are all in one of the other videos. But it covers a good size range and it has various options. There are two views. One has got pin tucks on, like the white blouse that I shared in the last video. And that was my entry to Sew April blouse. I'll put a picture of that in. And then the one without the pin tucks, which is the one I've made for this. And I kind of ummed and ahed about whether to put the pin tucks, but I just thought because it was a print and because I was doing the sleeves, that would kind of be enough really. And I think I was right about that. So what I'm doing is just straightening off the cuff. I'm hoping this will all make sense. So what I did when I first extended the sleeve was that I just extended the whole thing. When I splashed and spread it, I just extended the whole thing down, and then what I was finding when I was making up the cuff was obviously this part of the cuff here was narrower than this part of the cuff here, which was making it tricky when it came to close it. So what I'm going to do is to just extend this up the 12 centimeters plus the seam allowance, and then join this end to that other end. I decided at the last minute that I was going to add a tiny bit of volume as well. Now bearing in mind I've already done the other sleeve, so I can't make this one too different, but I do think that if I add so I've straightened off this again, so I did curve this again, but I've straightened it off again, and then I'm going to add just a little bit of length to the sleeve as well. So we'll see how that looks when I finish. So this is where I've got to. You can see I've added this straight apart here, which is where the smocking's going to go, and then I've joined that to the top end, and I've increased this by a couple of centimeters as well. Now it might mean that my sleeves don't look quite symmetrical, but I think this will be the best sleeve going forward. So what I'm going to do now is to trace that onto some proper paper so it looks a bit less like yeah, it's been pieced together from old bits of paper, which is what it has, and then it might look a bit more like it. I drew in my grain line and a perpendicular line to that to do those adjustments over, because of the first time I cut across I didn't cut quite straight, and when you're adding length it's always important to cut it perpendicular to the grain line, so that you get a good balance in the sleeve. So yes, that's where I've got to. The sleeves took some getting right, and the left one is better than the right one in terms of getting the shape. And this is the final shape that I did. So you can see, I think I showed in one of the other videos, me kind of doing slash and spread to get this right, retracing the arms eye to make sure that that was straight and that my notches were in, and then also then working out that I needed to straighten off this because, and then widen it because I hadn't quite thought that through properly. So that is my final, that is my going forward, with a lovely grease strain on it. Sorry about that. That's real life in my sewing room, which is the dining room, I suppose. But yes, so that's my going forward. And I've written, you can see 12C smocked cuff version, and the seam allowance with 10 millimeters at the base of the cuff. So I find it really helpful for future Deb to have all that information there in case I get a little bit confused. It's all written in my notes as well, but you know, from the sleeve I didn't make any other changes to the pattern. I'll put the series of smocking videos in. So you can see what I'm doing is marking with an erasable pen, a water erasable. I did try with the friction, but on this fabric it doesn't show very well, and so we're doing centimetre apart markings, and then I'm going to make a centimetre down grid. So this is the thing that takes the most time. So this is where we've got to. The dots are all marked-ish, mostly all right, I think. And so now I'm going to stitch these into the pleated up fabric. So I'm using contrasting thread, so just a Gutterman Mara 120, which is my standard thread, but I'm using it in a different colour than everything else. And what I've been doing is just making like a looped knot at the end, because this is quite a loose weave fabric and we don't want the thread pulling through. So what we're going to do is to make a line of stitches that like is a running stitch between the dots all the way along until we've got like a pleated up fabric. I'll show you a picture of what that looks like when it's done. Ooh, I'm just starting, but I've marked on the seam allowances so that I'm not stitching in the seams, and you can see that now this has got this straight edge on, which should make it a bit easier. We will have a go. So you can see there's the dots, and what I'm doing is coming in and out of a dot, like just as a running stitch, like so. So we just keep going. So you can do a few of these at a time. You just got to make sure you keep your stitch length all right. And what I was finding was when I did it before, once you've got a few of them in, it kind of becomes obvious where the line is. So obviously what you do is after each line is complete, you'll just let the tail go, so you don't knot the tail at the other end, because what you're trying to do, that one's a bit weird, what have I done there? Don't know what I've done there, that's a bit strange. What you do is to try and leave the other end up and then knot it from the same end again, so that your knots are all in one end and your loose ends are all the other end, and then you can gather them up without losing some of the ends when you've done the line. So I think I've got about 12 lines like this to do, which won't take that long. It's just kind of steady away, isn't it? You know, I've got a bit of a fixation with hand sewing anyway. So you can see that what I've done is to I've folded and ironed that top line just so that I don't wander off where the first line is, because I find if I can get the first couple of lines in properly, then that kind of sets the, like everything else, sets the tone for the whole thing, so makes it easier. Yeah, if you'd got a gingham fabric or similarly kind of like, especially if you did like a 1 centimetre gingham, that would be perfect, because you're doing these dots a centimetre apart, so you'd already have the markings made, and that's probably the most dull and time consuming part of it all, to be honest. So we've gone to the end, and so now what I'm going to do is to just, that's probably a bit long, but I'm just going to go and do the next one, so I'll come back to you when I've got a few more in. to create a 1x1 grid, which you do by painstakingly measuring 1x1 grids, and then you use a long running stitch through each of those dots. And hopefully I'm putting pictures up so you can see, or the video, I did a little video. And then you gather that together, and then you do your whatever smocking stitch you choose over the top. I was using this book, Rocking Smocking, which I talked about earlier on, but that doesn't have any patterns in it, just has inspiration. But yeah, have a look and be inspired, I suppose. This is probably the simplest thing to do, and I just wanted to like start with something really simple. And because I, as I said in the first video, I had been inspired by this toast blouse, which just had that very kind of simple effect. I didn't make any other changes to the pattern, as I said, and what I've done is done the dress length version with the straight hem. I am currently doing last Sewist standing, which means I'm not buying anything. I'm in heavyweight category. I'm not buying patterns, but I'm also not buying fabric. I'm also not buying buttons or call that notions, so none of that stuff. So then actually I thought I'd got the perfect button for this, but I'd used them. So I did put a little poll on Insta stories, and a lovely lady called Linda sent me the most beautiful card, but she also sent me some self-cover buttons. Now I haven't done those yet, and I haven't quite decided if I'm going to use them for this project or not. I had self-cover buttons, but I only had little tiny ones, this kind of the same size as this. So let me know what you think, whether you think that these buttons look all right. I'm kind of leaning towards them being okay, I think. But it is very interesting how buttons can make or break a project, and actually getting the wrong buttons can like completely change how I feel about things. So yes, Linda's a star. Thank you very much, Linda. She also sent me a lovely style arc dress, which I'm hoping I'm going to get made up at some point. And so I've worn this. I've only worn it as a dress so far, with a pair of blue clogs, which are 10 points clogs, which are very old, came from Lotta from Stockholm. I would think nearly 10 years ago now, and have been worn every year. I love them. But I wanted to explore styling it in different ways. And what I might well do when Me Made May is over, is to do a week of like, or 5 days or something, of see how many different ways I can style it, just to kind of like push start it a little bit. So I find that if I don't play with my makes when I've made them, I tend to be a bit more kind of, straightforward about how I wear them. So let me know if that's something that you do. The only other detail, so I've shown you the cuff. What I did at the cuff is, let me show you the better one. I'll show you the better one. Is I've done a button here with a loop, and the loop I've just done a thread loop. There's thread loops on this at the belt. I don't know if that'll be in shot or not. If it's not, I'll put a picture in. So there's a thread loop on a tiny button. Sorry, it's tricky to undo because I don't normally undo it. And then what I did was create a placket, and I've just done sew-in press studs. Now, actually, I don't need to undo that to get that on, so it's tending to stay done up. But that was just the best way that I found to kind of have it sitting nicely. Now, the other thing that I did was I added some, bring her over a little bit. I did some bias trim to the hem, and I just think then when you're walking, you get like that bit of a flash of that happening, which is good fun. There is not a yoke on this. I think I've said that before. There is a straight thread. Sorry about that. So the pleat goes straight into the collar, which I really like. It means for me, it doesn't feel so restrictive across the shoulder. I don't think I've done a forward, I don't think I need a forward shoulder on this one, or a high round back, because there's that extra kind of room across there. And that's probably what makes this one of my favourite shirt patterns, to be honest. There is a Hello Lovely, I should put a picture. I have Hello Lovely labels from years and years ago, but they're blue and yellow, which is why it went into this one. And I made the optional tie belt as well, and I did put the pockets on with the daisies going in the opposite direction. So they're all kind of aesthetic choices that you can kind of play with and decide whether you want to do or not, and that's the whole joy, isn't it? And it has been really interesting to feel how much slower everything's gone because this journey took some time. It kind of, as I said, I think before, it made everything else be a little bit slower. So it means the amount of things that I've produced has been a lot less. But, you know, I'm not in any rush. I've got lots of clothes and I've got lots of fabric. And I think when you're making something out of beautiful fabric that somebody has spent time making, the fabric, it's, you know, it's worth taking time, isn't it, and trying to get it right. So I want to say a special thank you, of course, to Kayleigh for the beautiful fabric and for letting me be a spring seasonal sewist, and for, even though I was having a month off Instagram for Easter at the time when I should have been publicising everything, she had no problem with that. And she's a treasure. And so I think that's what the sewing community is about, is supporting businesses with people who are making choices about their business that align with our values and who are lovely people who care about other people. And yeah. So when I spend money, that's where I spend money, is with people whose values I support, not anymore about getting things for cheap, because I don't think cheap is worthwhile anymore. Anyway, lecture over. So that's it from me for today. Thank you very much for following along this little series of my normal services, hopefully going to be resumed sometime soon. I have been sewing wearable toiles and normal toiles for Frock Tales, which is on Saturday, which is less than a week again. We're filming this on Sunday. So yes, I shall see you again soon. I hope wherever you are in the world, you're finding time to rest and replenish and do some making if that's something that brings you joy. And I shall say bye-bye for now. God bless.